welcome to Get Real America.
I'm Bill Edwards.
I'm Brittany Brown.
Here it is, Tuesday, here at the 25th day of April already as we head down the home stretch.
Man, it went by really quickly.
It really did. And one of the things that we've been talking about, we've talked yesterday and we'll talk extensively more about it as the week goes along, is things that happened at Orange Crush over the weekend at Tybee, and they're talking about Orange Crush 2 coming up this weekend. What's amazed me, Brittany, is how they've tried to glaze this over.
It was fine. Everything was good, right?
Yeah, everything was just perfect. They said, they said the Chatham County communities of Wilmington, Whitmarsh, Tullahee Island experienced similar traffic. There was traffic gridlock, people disrespecting, and yet they tried to, the Savannah morning misprint kept trying to glaze this over as these kids were just out there having a good time. It was good, clean fun, and there weren't any problems, and yet you saw people all over the sand dunes where they weren't supposed to be. And there was also Earth Day on Saturday.
Well, and Tybee is actually very, very strict about their rules. So
exactly.
It's interesting to allow all of these people to come in and then allow them to destroy what they've been protecting for years.
Yeah, and there was a beautiful statue at one of the churches there that was destroyed, and they're going to be the people who actually donated that statue say they're going to redonate it, get another one built. But how despicable to destroy other people's property. A lot of cars were damaged. There were traffic accidents. There was a shooting, and this didn't have to take place on Tybee. It was near Fort Pulaski out on Highway 80.
There were gunshots on Tybee.
Yeah, there were that as well. But they keep trying to kind of glaze this over, as Mayor Shirley Sessions is saying. Well, we're glad that we appreciate all the people that helped out and all the agencies that were involved, including Georgia State Patrol, Savannah Fire, all the Tybee Island first responders and things of that nature. And a lot of the first responders, they were run ragged.
Yes.
Trying to get through the traffic for one thing. So they were, these people were, their tongues were hanging out by the end of the weekend, trying to get to people and trying to help out where they could. So we'll see what happens. We want to talk to some people. I know we're going to try to get in touch with. We're getting in touch with one of the state representatives, Jesse Petrie, who lives on one of the islands, and to see what can be done to sort of, let's say, assuage some of the fears that these people have, and also to calm down the crowds.
Well, and I know that people on social media were like, we all need to run for office. We need to make some changes here. We need to make sure that we have more organization and that we're protecting Tybee. I mean, the residents were very upset, and Bill.
They should have been.
Well, they pay high taxes, and it's not cheap to live on Tybee. Like, that's a lot for people to have to deal with on a weekend.
Yeah, when it's especially I think they've upped the parking to $5 a minute or something like that.
Yeah.
There, so
Do you think any of them got parking tickets?
Huh?
Do you think they got parking tickets?
I'm sure they handed them out galore. Good luck.
Could they get to them?
Yeah.
Could they get to anywhere? I don't know. Very hard to move out on Tybee.
Laughing on the outside and crying on the inside. But they said now there were things like there were social media rumors that about a fire on the pier, mandatory lockdowns, traffic fatalities. None of those reports were true, and that's unfortunate that the way social media makes things worse. And they report, just like when you hear these rumors. One of my favorite people of all time, when I was working did a lot of extensive work with Key Club, which is a high school service organization sponsored by Kiwanis International, and go to some of the international conventions. And a fellow named Phil Guglielmo, we call him Mr. Phil, from Metairie, Louisiana. And he does a great, when some of his seminars, he does a great thing about how rumors get spread. What he does, he asks for 5 volunteers. He sends 4 of them out of the room so they can't hear what he's saying. He tells the 5th one why he was late he has a little spiel he's made up on why he's late for work. About how he forgot his briefcase, he had to go back, he ran into a girl in an electric blue dress, and he spilled the contents of his briefcase, and some of the stuff got messed up, and he's got about a 3-minute spiel on what happened and why he was late for an appointment. So he tells that kid, all right, now I want you to tell the next person coming in why I was late. So they call one of the people in from out of the hall, and the first guy, and this first person who's heard the story tells the person, and of course the story is altered considerably. Then they ask for the 3rd person to come in. They come in, that person has to tell the next person. By the time they get to the last one, you are laughing so hard you're watering the plants, because the story is totally different what happened, how he got electrocuted or whatever it was, because the electric blue dress somehow got to his being shocked or electrocuted. It's just hysterical when they do these things, and he looks around when it's all over and these people are all laughing. He says, and you wonder how rumors get started. Well, the same thing is happening on social media on a mega scale.
Yep.
These people publish stuff that's not, and we'll go into this a little bit later, but that story coming out of Brunswick about the handicapped kid, most of that story was false.
Wow.
So the truth is finally coming out, but most of that story was false, and it was social media that got it made it look a lot worse than it was.
That's unfortunate, Bill. Well, and I will say the news media also plays into all of that. They're not guilty in this.
Yeah, there was in fact, Brittany, there's a group that used to come up every year just to trap the media in its own resources. They would come up with, they'd call a press conference. They would come up with some letterhead from some organization that doesn't exist, and they said they're going to do this, this, and this. They were calling this press conference, and they would in the old days of fax machines, they would fax it out to newsrooms all around the country or a particular community or something, and say this is what's going to happen. Now, the company didn't exist. These people weren't really who they said they were, but they call this press conference. The press would show up and they'd say, like, hey, April Fools, you fell for this. You didn't check it out. You didn't see that this was a false company. You didn't see that this was a false information. Yet you parroted it right on the air. And so they're not doing their homework anymore. I don't know what they're teaching them in journalism school, but in the 30 years almost that I worked in a television newsroom, I noticed that the kids coming in year after year were getting dumber and dumber and knew less and less about less and less. It was just pathetic.
Well, and in the media, it's, how can we get the most clicks? What's the most sensational thing that we can put as the heading so that we get clicks? Whether it's true or misleading, it doesn't matter. Get us the clicks.
And what bothers me the most, and it bothered a lot of the reporters today as well, is that they seem to be a lot more concerned about what you did on your social media page than what you did on the air. I was told even on the radio, I want you to do a blog every day. I want you to do this every day. I want you to post this every day. And I said, what about this? What about my actual show that's on the air that people the people tune in to listen to? Do that too. But you've got to do this, that, or the other.
Well, that's the thing. They're having people do too much, and I think it devalues their show prep and the different things that they have going on, unless they have a full team to do all of that. Yeah. But then it's actually not you writing the blog. It's not, you know what I mean? So exactly. It's very interesting, but they're requiring a lot from people that are on the radio, social media influencers, those types of things. But I will tell you, I don't know, the social media influencer thing is just out of hand.
And maybe they ought to teach that in the classrooms, because we're certainly learning a lot about what's going on in classrooms, and to make sure that we know about it, we're putting cameras in classrooms. Liberty County has done it already. Effingham County is getting ready to do it. From WTOC, they had a report over the weekend about how Effingham County is going to be spending about $2 million to put in cameras in all the classrooms, starting with high school.
We are learning the Effingham County school system will soon put surveillance cameras in all public school classrooms.
The multi-million-dollar project has some parents very cheerful, but some teachers are a little wary. Camille Syed tells us how the camera system will work.
I think it's a necessary thing, definitely.
High school classrooms will be the first in Effingham County Public Schools to get these cameras in the fall.
That safety net there for our staff and our students is very important.
Superintendent Dr. Yancey Ford says middle schools will come soon after, and then elementary schools next spring. He says along with safety, they're getting the cameras so staff can see situations firsthand instead of relying on word of mouth.
Not only just providing that camera for safety, but we're also able to add one more tool to our teachers' toolbox where they will be able to review themselves as a teacher.
Speaking of teachers, Ford says some are worried about this newest addition.
Who's going to be able to watch me? Why would they watch me? When is it appropriate?
He says administrators will only be able to monitor a teacher through the cameras if they have the teacher's permission.
we've got to develop that trust from an administrator standpoint with our teachers.
And parents with children in Effingham County schools tell me putting cameras in classrooms is something they're in favor of.
If the school systems can afford it, I think that they definitely need to incorporate those for the safety of the children. With this day and age, with the mass shootings and stuff, we're losing children almost on a daily basis.
She also mentioned being able to get proof of bullying is a plus. Dr. Ford says Liberty County schools also have these cameras and have had fewer problems as a result.
That one child thinks not to harm another child or bully another child because there's a camera in the room, then we may have saved that other child's life because we don't know how long that's been going on or where it's been going on.
The cameras by Cloud 12, costing more than $2 million, are being funded by money from the state, American Rescue Plan dollars, and East Blost. Camille Syed, WTOC News.
All right, I can see where this would be a double-edged sword, and and police, the body cams have certainly helped them,
Yes.
especially on traffic stops where a guy said, "Oh, you called me this or you called me that," or "You were very belligerent." And then they show the video and said, "Oh, okay, I'll drop the charges."
Yeah.
Yeah. So there can be that, and when you know you're on camera, you perform differently.
It's 100% true, but I will say, like, that has to be a lot of pressure on a teacher too, because you want to always do the right thing, but we're human, and sometimes people do not give you any grace for making a mistake.
Yeah.
And which is unfortunate, but I do see the double-edged sword. However, not only the bullying that they're talking about, but teachers have been attacked. I was talking to one of our interns, and she was talking about that, and I think that's a very good point. Like, because when kids are taking out their phones to film things, you're only getting a piece of what's going on. You're not getting the whole story. So
Exactly.
when they're always on, I think that you'll get more of the story. It will help protect teachers, especially in some of these environments that have not been friendly, and the kids are really out of control. And Bill, we're living in different times, and I think that we should be monitoring what teachers are doing because of all of the CRT that we've seen in our schools, this emotional social learning stuff, this gender stuff. I mean, the list goes on, and the names are always changing, so it's really hard to keep up on what they're doing. So, having cameras in the classroom, and I understand that they're not going to turn them on all the time, but it would be interesting if parents could jump in and see what was being taught to their kids.
Well, and it's also the media shows you what the media wants you to see. They can edit stories to come out the way they want them to. We had this, the hideous story on it was Dateline NBC years ago, doing a story in which one of the reporters lost his job, fortunately because they were criticizing a General Motors pickup truck that used something called a side saddle gas tank. Not the best idea General Motors ever had, where they put the gas tank on the side of the truck, which means if you get hit broadsided, it could cause a fire. It was only protected by a little piece of sheet metal, as opposed to being underneath is protected by some type of steel and that sort of thing. But they tried to simulate this, and they finally got so tired of the simulation not working. They put little sparklers underneath the truck so that the fire would erupt when the collision occurred. They didn't tell people that, but the lawyers for General Motors found the entire footage and showed it. And so a reporter named Stone Phillips lost his job over it. They should have fired the female reporter too, but you can't do that these days. But at the same time, the media shows you what they want you to see. I got in trouble one time talking to some high school kids about that when I was talking about the Rodney King incident. I said, I saw the entire footage of Rodney being stopped. He gets out of the car and he comes and he aggressively goes after the police and is resisting arrest. Now, it got to the point where, and it did get out of hand, and the police should have been disciplined for what they did, but they got him on the ground and he was still protesting. And by the way, this guy had a rap sheet as long as your arm. And they started kicking him to try, and it got bad. But when I told these kids, I said, Rodney King started it. I thought I was going to have a riot on my hands, and was looking for the side door to get out because the black students were just absolutely livid. I was saying, we saw what we needed to see. I said, okay. No, you didn't. You didn't hear the whole story, and they showed this, and as a result, riots took place. People were seriously injured. The story of the truck driver that was pulled out of his truck, and they started beating him over the head and broke a concrete block over his head, damn near killed him. Did considerable brain damage. I think cracked skull and things of that nature. But and all that because the media wanted you to see, showed you what they wanted you to see.
Well, and guess what is good for the government? Chaos and unrest. So
that's good for television too, because of the pictures that they have. Oh, good video on this.
Yes. Well, we'll be talking about that more when we get back.
Hello, I am Bob Williams, current president of the Savannah Scottish Games. This is our 44th Savannah Scottish Games. We've been at Bethesda Academy for the last 15 or so years. Simultaneously, we have the Border Collie demonstrations herding sheep. We have children's activities. We have the Celtic dancers, the Highland dancers. We have the athletic field right in front of us here. And behind me we have the Celtic music entertainment tent. So we have over 50 clans represented here at today's games. This is the time for Scots to get together, share their cultural heritage. We have a genealogy tent so they can find out the history of their family name and how it connects to Scotland, along with a lot of the Scottish history. We have reenactors on site that demonstrate some of the activities that were taking place during the 18th and 19th centuries. As this country was getting settled and this role that Scots played during it.
Welcome back to Get Real America.
I'm Bill Edwards.
I'm Brittany Brown.
Happy Tuesday. Glad to have you aboard. And we have a situation now where a terrorist attack in America could become imminent once more. Our enemies are getting more emboldened because we have a president who doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and they know that he's not, and our enemies know that he doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and he wants to appease them. We're talking about how friendly we ought to be to China these days, and China is our #1 adversary. And it's getting worse in places like Afghanistan. You remember the Afghanistan story? Remember how we were there for 20 years?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. No one is talking about the damage that pullout has caused, and I mean the build-up there in Afghanistan, it is not good, Bill.
No, it's not, especially since they've got about, $20 or $30 billion worth of our, maybe $100 billion worth of our, the latest military equipment that we just left there. So that hasn't helped. Mike Walz is a congressman from Florida and a former Green Beret. He was on with Trey Gowdy on Sunday night in America on the Fox News channel, and he said, we got some things to worry about.
Yes, we do. Let's take a look.
Member of the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees, Florida Congressman Mike Waltz. Great to see you again, Mike. I mean, just because everyone predicted it, it doesn't make it less frightening and shocking now we have intelligence confirming it.
Yeah, Steve, well, look, I'm not going to verify the accuracy of what this idiot leaked, but I could tell you for certain, generally speaking, the intelligence community is blinking red. The terrorists did not get the memo that Joe Biden wanted the war on terror to be over. And they are reconstituting. They have sleeper cells all over the world, including in Europe. They are trying once again to acquire weapons of mass destruction and drones. There are 50,000 ISIS fighters and families in prison camps in Syria. They are coordinating across multiple countries. And now we have the general in charge of the Middle East saying they could actively strike our interests within the next 6 months. This is worse than it was before 9/11. We are in a much worse situation than we were even then.
I mean, it's really, really, it's frightening. And can I ask you what you make of the state of play in terms of what they promised us at the time they would do in response to the pullout? Do you remember they used this phrase, the over-the-horizon capacity? That was the big phrase they were using. They said, don't worry, it's fine. We're not in Afghanistan. We've got this over-the-horizon capacity, and that's how we'll keep an eye on the terrorists. How's that looking today?
Yeah, well, it's a big lie, frankly. It's completely misleading. And here's why. We're still going after ISIS leaders and taking them out successfully. We just took one out this last week in Syria. The Biden spokesperson just pointed to an operation in Somalia. Here's the difference. We have people on the ground there. We have assets there. We have special forces in the region. We have bases in the region, in neighboring countries. We have drones that we can go after them with. In Afghanistan, Steve, we have none of that. We gave up all of our bases. We don't have bases in any neighboring country. Our allies, what few are left, are literally being hunted down as we speak. Billions of equipment left behind. Our drones spend about 80% of their fuel just to get from the Middle East to Afghanistan, and they're dependent on the Taliban's buddies in Pakistan. So it is a very difficult situation. The thing that's worse is they've made a deal with the devil with the Taliban and want us to believe that we can depend on the not so bad terrorists to help us go after ISIS. That didn't work at Abbey Gate. It's not going to work now. And look, at the end of the day, special operators, my fellow Green Berets, SEALs, and others, it breaks my heart, are going to have to go back and clean this up.
I was going to quickly ask you about that. Can the situation be salvaged with that sort of action?
Well, I mean, look, not to make everybody want to drink even more after what I just laid out, but we have to put a plan B in place. There are still pockets of resistance to the Taliban. I am working on both the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee to make sure we have a backup plan. I'm not going to wait till, God forbid, we have another 9/11 or San Bernardino or Pulse nightclub, or we can go down the list till we take action. And we're going to keep hammering away on this administration to put measures in place to deal with this.
Well, thank goodness for that. Thank you. Thank goodness we got someone sensible there up in Washington in leadership, and I know many of your colleagues as well, pushing for the right outcome here. Thank you for your analysis this evening, Congressman Waltz.
So, as he said, if that didn't make you want to take another drink, don't know what does. But we need to get a handle on this, and we need to do it soon. And we need to, by the way, make sure that we're not bringing any more terrorists across on that border. But I don't know how well that's going to work.
Well, that's the thing. The thing that concerns me, Bill, is that we're seeing people become more emboldened and our president do less and less. I mean, I think he's calling lids on most days at like 8:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. Which might not be a bad thing, but whatever he's doing, it's not working.
Yeah.
But I don't see him standing up to any of these people. I think he's going to allow things to get worse. I don't think that his foreign policy is terrible, and we knew that it was.
Yeah. As opposed to Donald Trump's, when they said that this guy didn't have any experience in foreign and working with foreigners, and he was the only one. He was the first one that came up with a Middle East peace deal that we had been talking about for over 50 years. I always used to say, when the Middle East peace process, and they talk about that, I'd fall off the couch in hysterics because we didn't have one, and he actually established it. And they didn't have any experience in foreign dealing. This man was an international businessman.
Well, he's a master at negotiation.
Exactly.
And I think that, however you feel about Donald Trump, there are things that he was very, very talented at. And
look how much better things were when he was president as opposed to what we have now in just over 2 years.
Well, and, we do have someone that is going to be running for Senate in Arizona, which is a very big border state and has caused a lot of problems for our country.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
And their disaster of an election as well with Katie Hobbs and Carrie Blake. I did hear that case has been moved back down to the lower court for them to go through a lot of the evidence, so we'll see how that pans out. But the good news is that Sheriff Mark Lamb is the one that is going to be running for that Senate seat, which I think is going to be huge. He is America First. He's been America First sheriff, and he's going to be an America First senator, and I think that he will get the votes he needs.
Sheriff, we're on your six.
Begin with a tragedy out of the East Valley where a baby and young man are killed in a collision.
Those victims have been identified as family members of Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb.
We lost our son and our 1-year-old granddaughter 8 days before Christmas. There's simply no pain that compares to losing a child, let alone a grandbaby. I will forever have a hole in my heart. Throughout this difficult time, Janelle and I have prayed a lot, we've cried a lot. We've also hugged our other children and grandchildren just a little bit tighter. During his life, our son Cooper struggled with drug addiction. He even spent time in my jail for an issue stemming from fentanyl use. Almost every Arizona family, even the sheriff's family, is being touched by this drug crisis. As the sheriff of Pinal County, I have been on the front lines of this border fight. I have personally carried the dead bodies from the ditches, rescued children from sex trafficking, and arrested gang members and drug dealers. I know what deadly drugs and the criminals peddling them are doing to families and communities. I know what it did to my family. We need leaders in this country that aren't too politically correct to protect us. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. If Washington can spend $100 billion defending Ukraine's borders, we can finish the wall and keep our own communities safe. It's time to declare the drug cartels terrorist organizations and use military force to wipe them out just like we did to ISIS. American lives are on the line, and we must fight to save them. I'll stand up to the woke left and the weak politicians in Washington. Secure our border and support our law enforcement. Defend our Second Amendment and the right to life. Cutting wasteful spending, fighting inflation, and putting more money back in your pocket. These are the fights we must win. Washington needs a new sheriff in town. I'm Sheriff Mark Lamb. Let's get to work.
Welcome back to Get Real America.
I'm Bill Edwards.
I'm Brittany Brown.
Here it is, Tuesday already.
Yes, and lots of things to talk about, but PragerU, they've done a really good job of doing different things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they did was they have this Story of Us series, and it talks to different people that, you know, maybe talks about their story and what they've gone through. And there's a guy who accidentally red-pilled himself by by watching PragerU videos, because he was actually going to do a story about combating every argument that they were making for things.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, the more I,
Looked
watched
into
it, he's like,
yeah.
I, eventually realized that I had been lied to. And he was a BLM activist. I mean, he was full 9 yards. And when he started watching PragerU videos, it totally changed, and he is now actually with PragerU, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah,
I was going to make a series debunking PragerU videos, and one by one, I unintentionally dismantled the entire narrative that I was indoctrinated with, or in other words, I accidentally red-pilled myself. My name is Xavier DeRusso, and this is my story. So I was born in one of the roughest neighborhoods of Southside Chicago. I always describe it as like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but backwards, where my eldest brother got in trouble. So my mom got scared and got our whole family together, and we moved to the middle of nowhere cornfields in central Illinois. At the time, it was roughly 95% white. So it was a big culture shock for my family, but I'm grateful that I grew up there because there were great schools, there was low crime, but instead of being taught to appreciate that, I was always told to hyper-focus on the difference between myself as a black kid versus all the white kids around me. My mom, she didn't grow up around white people, so when she would tell me things like, oh, you need to be careful, if things hit the fan, then they're just gonna view you as that black guy, he did it. It wasn't out of hate, it was out of her genuinely trying to protect me. My dad, on the other hand, was a bit more radical in his beliefs on race. He was often very spiteful towards white people and often telling me things that I needed to be protected from white people. Certain people in my family would say that white people were always out to get me. That message had a big impact on my self-image. I felt like it was very difficult for me to figure out who I was as a person. I felt like I was too black to be around the white kids, and then I would spend my summers or weekends in Chicago, and it was like I was too white for the black kids. I would be made fun of for the way I spoke or my upbringing. They would say I was talking or acting white. So the older I got, the more I felt like I needed to root my entire identity in my skin color. I wanted to be around more culture because at this point I was truly in this belief that my skin color was always going to be everything. So I wanted to be around liberals and diversity and inclusion. So I moved to California. At that point in my life, I was very angry and I was very lost because I didn't know who I was. So between 2018 to 2020, I was just social media advocating for BLM, trying to raise awareness and teach other people why being more woke was essential for the community. By 2020, that's when things started to definitely take a turn. I was bored during the pandemic and I applied to be on this really popular reality show where I was typecast as a virtual BLM activist, where I taught people how to be an ally and an advocate for BLM. That was right after everything happened with George Floyd. And marching for George Floyd was actually the first time I started to see behind the curtain of what BLM actually was. One of the first things that alarmed me about the BLM protests were, of course, the looting and the rioting. I was always against that. I didn't understand the premise of it. I didn't understand the reasoning for it. And it just seemed so hateful and violent and like it was against everything that MLK stood for. And I would ask people questions of, why are there people destroying Black communities in the name of Black civil rights justice? But no one wanted to have that conversation. So I started becoming more open-minded to looking at counter arguments and looking at alternative content that opposed the BLM beliefs. And I accidentally stumbled upon a Candace Owens video that made me so unbelievably, ridiculously mad because she was right. That's when things started to definitely take a turn. So in spite of her, I decided I was going to become a pro-debater. And that's when I found more of PragerU's videos. And I started listing out different videos, different talking points, topics from PragerU videos, and I planned in my mind that I was going to make a series debunking PragerU videos. And one by one, I unintentionally dismantled the entire narrative that I was indoctrinated with, or in other words, I accidentally red-pilled myself. People always ask me, what was your red pill moment? But for me, it was like an entire prescription pill bottle of red pills, because just over and over, I was like, well, don't believe that anymore. Don't believe that anymore. I would say it started with learning just how fraudulent the statistics were about police brutality. I was under this impression that Black people were just being hunted down every single day by police officers. And I ended up learning that it was a very small, minute amount of unarmed Black people who were being shot and killed by police. And when I'm around police officers, I feel so safe. Police officers love me because I mind my business. I don't break the law. I don't have to worry about the police officers targeting me because that's not what they're here to do. Yes, here and there might be a bad police officer, and those are the people who do need to be held accountable. But the majority of people who become police officers are doing so because they're so passionate about protecting people, about empowering the community. So why would we remove these people and defund them when they're the ones that we call when we need help the most? And why aren't we talking about the selectivity and Black lives that matter? Because nobody ever wanted to have the discussion of Black on Black crimes. And that was a problem that nobody had any proper answers for me about, other than to say, oh, you can't talk about Black on Black crime, it's just crime. But if we're going to talk about Black death, let's talk about where most of it is coming from. It's coming from murder and it's coming from abortion. So it was around October of 2020 where I was still in the process, days before flying out for this reality show, to be a BLM activist, and I finally just backed out. I couldn't do it. I knew that it wasn't what I believed in, and I just couldn't go on there and portray this lie. So when I jumped into the conservative movement, I expected a lot of people to turn their backs on me, and quite a few people did. And when people ask me, did you lose friends? I don't consider those friends that I lost, because a real true friend wouldn't care that you have slightly different ideologies. As long as your core values align, then why does who you vote for matter? I've had people as close as my own sibling turn their back on me because of my ideologies. We do not need to be attached to any party, to any ideology. We just need to be attached to the truth. Sometimes when I try to explain to people why I don't support BLM and I show them the facts and I show them statistics, they try to tell me that that is just me being brainwashed and that I'm looking away from the bigger picture. But no, like, that is the entirety of the picture. Facts and stats do not care about your skin color. It's not racist to tell the truth. The focus on skin color to me is just so outdated, and it's just honestly tragic to me that people still think that it's so important. Every nation that you look at has injustices in their history. But when I look at America, I feel like we should feel privileged that we can look at our history and recognize, wow, like our country actually did something to right our wrongs and to right our injustices. And we are now the most progressive country in the world. But unfortunately, in many ways, we've overcorrected because now people feel the need to critically find racism in everything. The Black community is not systemically oppressed. We are systemically depressed, and we're not prioritizing the principles that need to be put into the Black family household. Black people really do lean into pop culture a lot. It's a huge aspect of our community. That's why I think it's important for us to talk about culture and not just policy, because culture is often what influences policy, and it influences the way that we vote. So we do need to pay closer attention to who it is that we have on our screens, what we have in our headphones, and who we're listening to. We need to listen to positivity, to things that motivate us, the things that make us want to be better as a community. The left had this history of making the Black community dependent on them and making the Black community just mentally enslaved for so many years. I knew that I had to speak up about it. I'm much happier as a Black conservative. Someone once told me that I look like I've been so relieved and like there's so much less stress in my life now that I'm a conservative, and it's the truth. And if you are someone who speaks a certain way, you speak too intelligently for the people around you, don't allow people telling you that talking white is a bad thing. There's no such thing as talking white. That's a reflection of their own insecurities and their own ignorance. If you know what it is that you stand firm on, that is the most beautiful thing in the world. You have to lean into your own core values. And if people criticize you, just know that your integrity and the message that you are trying to live out is so much more important than any pushback that you're ever going to get. And I would rather know that I'm standing on values and truth than knowing that I'm just going along with the narrative that people so badly want me to believe in. Don't let someone tell you that because you're Black, that this is what you can and cannot do. You have so much more potential in yourself than what the media wants you to believe. It's like this crutch of racism that you never actually needed. We don't need to be put into this little category of this is how Black people need to think. Our ancestors fought so that we didn't have to stay in that box. So why would we do them an injustice by continuing to allow ourselves to be mentally oppressed? We are so much better than that as a community.
I mean, his story is so promising, isn't it, Bill?
Well, it is. And it reminds me sort of a parallel. C.S. Lewis, one of the great Christian writers of all time, he was a flaming atheist. Wow. He was as anti-Christian and as agnostic, or not agnostic, actually, as atheist as you can get. No God, no Christ. This didn't work. So, and he was going to prove it, that there was no God, and started doing all this research into Christianity and all that, and going through the Middle East and all these places where Jesus was and all the things that the Bible said took place. The more research he did, he said, I may be the most reluctant Christian in history, because he found that so much evidence to the contrary of what he believed. He finally said, I can't intellectually continue to be an atheist anymore, and he became a very card-carrying Christian. For sure, giving us the tales of Narnia right on down the line.
Well, and I think the interesting thing about people that maybe grow up in it versus the people that find it, they're more devout and they're more, like, I know a lady who was a lifelong Democrat, and she's like, I feel like I was asleep for 50 years. And then she switched to being a Republican, and she's one of the best Republicans I know. She's like more conservative than most of the Republicans.
Well, it's the same thing with with illegal immigrants who come here and are warning us that, I saw this in China. I saw this in Poland. I remember one of the great statements from this lady in Poland, from Poland, who was here, and she had lived through World War II, and said, what was the difference? What was the difference between when the Nazis took over Poland and when the war was over, when he was turned over to Russia? What was the difference in the Nazi regime and the Soviet regime? She said, what was the difference? The flag.
Wow.
That was it. And she's warned us that it's happening here.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think that also is proof that we really do need to work on being grateful and also understanding why things are really great, or, you know, I guess just be more grateful that we don't have to have the journey of finding something.
Exactly.
Whether it's religion or why America's great or the different things like that. So I just thought that was an interesting perspective.
For sure, yeah. All right, coming up next, speaking of Prager University.
Yes.
We have another president to tell you about, and as we told you yesterday about how Calvin Coolidge became president on Warren Harding's death, and then he was elected president, and how he really turned things around in America. And it wasn't called the Roaring Twenties for nothing. Great article and special that Fox News has done, an hour special on Calvin Coolidge that I highly recommend to you. And the book on Calvin Coolidge, because he was one of our most underrated and least known presidents, because he was known as Silent Cal, but he didn't say much. He just did a lot.
But he said do less.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting.
Doing more with less. That's what it's all about.
When we get back.
Hello, I am Bob Williams, current president of the Savannah Scottish Games. This is our 44th Savannah Scottish Games. We've been at Bethesda Academy for the last 15 or so years. Simultaneously, we have the Border Collie demonstrations herding sheep. We have children's activities. We have the Celtic dancers, the Highland dancers. We have the athletic field right in front of us here. And behind me, we have the Celtic music entertainment tent. So we have over 50 clans represented here at today's games. This is the time for Scots to get together, share their cultural heritage. We have a genealogy tent so they can find out the history of their family name and how it connects to Scotland, along with a lot of the Scottish history. We have reenactors on site that demonstrate some of the activities that were taking place during the 18th and 19th centuries. As this country was getting settled, and this role that Scots played during that.
Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah, we'll never be alone. Savannah, the beauty of the world. Savannah, let's all take a walk. Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah.
When you're looking to buy a business or sell a business, the experts at Best Business Brokers have you covered. Whether you're ready to cash in on your years of hard work or you're taking that first step in buying a business of your own, they're here to guide you through the process and make sure you get the best outcome possible. By having Best Business Brokers assist you when you buy a business or sell a business, they handle the legwork of the intricate process. This ensures a smooth transition of ownership, allowing you to get to work immediately or receive payment for your business as soon as possible. With base operations in Savannah and Charleston, they service all of Georgia and South Carolina. If you're considering starting a business here, the mild winters and 5-tiered economic areas make these the perfect places to do so. If you're ready to buy a business or sell a business, then you're ready to contact Best Business Brokers. Visit their website at b3brokers.com or call at 912-349-0940.
Serving the Savannah area with the power of the Shield since 1934, with personal insurance, employee benefits, and business insurance. With integrity, security, and trust. For more information, go to thepoweroftheshield.com.
Come join us today at Sweet Potatoes Kitchen for some of that good Southern home cooking, like fried chicken, fish, and mouth-watering banana pudding. Say it's the best in the world, and you won't get an argument from me. Also, those vegetables are fresh and delicious. Voted Southside's best restaurant in Savannah at least 5 times, and large corporate parties are welcome. Tell them Bill Edwards sent you. Drop by and eat today. Everybody loves sweet potatoes.
Welcome back to Get Real America.
I'm Bill Edwards.
I'm Brittany Brown.
And as we head down the home stretch here, once again, Prager University, we thank them profusely. They say you can make a tax-deductible donation to them to keep these free videos going. And these are videos that ought to be shown to our school kids and not things like, an inconvenient lie. I'm sorry, an inconvenient truth.
100%. And they've done a great series on presidents. And so we have adopted that into our show.
We have. And today we learned about Silent Cal.
Do more. That's what Americans demand of their presidents these days. A real president, Democrat or Republican, knows how to use the office. A real president makes things happen. Or so the conventional wisdom. But actually, there is another model. A president can succeed through inaction by doing as little as possible. One such president was Calvin Coolidge, who took office upon Warren Harding's sudden death. From the time Coolidge became president in 1923 to the time he left in 1929, Coolidge served a philosophy that was simple and powerful. Don't do. Coolidge was our great refrainer. The leadership style matched the personal style. Coolidge did not waste words, hence his nickname, Silent Cal. For these quiet ways, the 30th president absorbed much abuse. A Washington socialite, Alice Longworth, said that Coolidge looked like he'd been weaned on a pickle. Coolidge indeed cut a sharp contrast to Alice's father, Theodore Roosevelt, who had served a decade and a half earlier. And what a contrast Coolidge provides with another Roosevelt, Franklin, who came just a few years later. Born on July 4, 1872, in rural Vermont, Coolidge embodied the simple virtues of his forebears. He was hardworking, sober, and cautious. He was also fearless. A lifelong civil servant, he worked his way up from city councilman to governor of Massachusetts. He made his political reputation by facing down the Boston Police Department when it went on strike in 1919. There is no right to strike against the public safety by anybody, anywhere, anytime, Coolidge told strikers. Then the Coolidge administration fired them all and built a new department from scratch. This made him a national hero, a politician with a backbone. The refrainer brought that backbone into the White House and got the kind of results men of action long for, especially economic results. Low unemployment, often well below 5%, low taxes, higher wages, fewer strikes, new technology for the masses, a Model A or a Bell phone or an RCA radio. And most remarkable of all, a shrinking federal budget. If you remember just one fact about Coolidge's presidency, let it be this. Coolidge left the federal budget lower than he found it. How did Coolidge do it? First, he resisted taking unnecessary action himself. Second, he imposed the same discipline on Congress. That wasn't easy in the early 1920s. The progressive movement was on the march. Just as now, progressives always wanted to do something. Progressive plans included more aid for agriculture, encouraging unions, increasing taxes, and nationalizing important industries such as railroads and utilities. Coolidge blocked the progressives and thereby blocked their expansion of government. He vetoed farm subsidies twice, even though he personally came from farming country. Coolidge was sympathetic to farmers, but helping them wasn't the government's function. Coolidge made especially good use of the pocket veto, the ability of the president to veto a bill by simply not returning it to Congress. It is much more important to kill a bad bill, he said, than to pass a good one. The legislation Coolidge did endorse was designed to meet the same minimalist end, restrain the government. Together with his Treasury Secretary, Andrew Mellon, Coolidge lowered the top tax rate to 25%. Their goal was to shrink the public sector so that the private sector could expand, and the policy worked. The country liked Coolidge's thrift. In the 1924 election, the progressives won 17% of the vote. But Coolidge won with more votes than the Democrats and progressives combined. So everyone, including his own Republican Party, thought Coolidge would surely run a second time in 1928. But he declined. Like George Washington, he thought the country needed a change in leaders. Yes, It's possible to criticize Coolidge. As much as he tried to avoid it, Coolidge in the end signed bills he would have preferred not to. And the president showed a penchant for protectionism, rarely a sound economic policy. Some suggest that Coolidge was responsible for the stock market crash and the decade-long depression that followed after he left office. But that's a fallacy. The depression stretched so long not because of too little action from Calvin Coolidge, but because of too much action by his successors. It is ironic that a man of such personal modesty presided over the era known as the Roaring Twenties. But that was the paradox. Coolidge was a Scrooge who begat plenty. Perhaps the day has come for a new politician to follow the great refrainer's rule. Where others do, don't. And if you have to do less. I'm Amity Schlaze, author of Coolidge and chairman of the Coolidge Foundation for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
I love that his philosophy was to do less.
Yeah. In fact, somebody said that, after he passed away, somebody said, President Coolidge has died. Somebody said, how can you tell? Because he was so behind the scenes type thing. And he didn't want to run for president again. He did what he needed to do, and it's unfortunate that he's not the shiny example that every other president has taken, or at least very few, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump to be the most recent examples of a Calvin Coolidge type approach to government.
Well, that's the thing, Bill. Like, the more we watch about history, the more we see about history, it's like, oh my gosh, this is like the same stuff we're dealing with today.
Exactly.
And how do we fix it? I don't know. Let's look at how they fixed it back then. All seems to be very reasonable.
And it all comes down to the same formula. As Rush Limbaugh says, when you learn 2 times 2 is 4, you don't need to take that course anymore. That's it. You shouldn't have to relearn this all the time, that when government gets, when you cut taxes, the government gets more money because companies can employ more people because they don't have as much corporate tax to pay. And so when you hire more people, those people pay income taxes, which means more money to the government. When Ronald Reagan was president, he cut all those taxes, and he cut all those taxes on the government almost doubled its income.
I mean, it makes sense, Bill. And it worked. We have proof that it's worked.
Well, and here's how the media loves to lie with the truth. Is what they said, it doubled, but our debt kept going up. That's because Congress tripled its spending. That's why it went up. It wasn't because they weren't getting more money. It was because Congress was continuing to spend like drunken sailors, except the caveat there is that drunken sailors spend their own money.
I prefer that.
Yeah, I do too.
I prefer that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what happened, and that's the lie that they continue to tell to make it look like Reagan's policies were a failure.
Well, and also I like the fact that we also saw that when you take the government out of things get better. It's amazing how that works.
Isn't it unbelievable?
That's unbelievable.
Hard to believe. All right. Well, that takes care of it for us.
Yes, thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you for the Wednesday show.
Hump Day coming up.